Okay, here we are, and we are going live on how to break free. How do you break free? What do we need to do in order to free ourselves from our troubles, from our challenges, from our problems? Now, you ask an addict this question, and that's going to make for a fascinating conversation. If you ask an addict that question, how do you break free? I mean, I can't even imagine what an amazing conversation that would take. Lots to learn from an addict, but I'm going to give you an insight from Torah right now, from the Parasha of the week, and I think that could tie in nicely with how we can break free from our own problems, and particularly from our biggest problem of all. We have a huge problem, which is the problem that our collective is trying to overcome, because we are all in exile right now. That's where we're at, guys. We're all in exile. We're all in Golus. Our souls have descended into this world which is dysfunctional. We've been discussing this in the past couple of days about Adam and Eve being in the lowest of all worlds, in the most dysfunctional and darkest of all worlds. You don't like that? We're in the most a world of death, a world of financial troubles and struggles, a world of relationship issues and therapy, a world of parenting concerns and troubles. I mean, a world of you can't even get along with a snake. I mean, seriously. You know, think about that. What a dysfunctional world that we've descended into. And the reason we've descended into this world, like God told Adam and Eve, is to fix it. That's it. The goal of mankind in this world is in order to fix this world. The question is, okay, so we just barely got the memo that we're in this lowest world, in this darkest world, the world of spiritual darkness. But how do we fix it? What do we have to do? So we know we got to keep our faith. We got to keep our faith through the struggles. We got to keep Torah and mitzvahs. God tells us explicitly as Jewish people. Well, there's two tracks here for Gentiles and Jews. For the Gentiles, what they have to do, they've got to make the world a functional, peaceful, normal place. That's the role of all human beings in this world, is to turn the chaos of this world into something functional. That's why we have the 7 Noahide laws, which is to restore peace and equality and courts of law and justice in the world. But the Jewish people have a specific mission, a very, very specific mission that the Jewish people have. And what is that mission? That is to be a light unto the nations. It's not enough for a Jew. I mean, if a Jew behaves like a non-Jew, then he's doing a good job for a non-Jew, but he's not doing a good job for a Jew, right? In other words, if you're the CEO of the company and you're doing the same job as the guy who's on the production line, what's called the on the front line. I mean, that's good. You're doing a good job, but you're failing at your job as the CEO because there's more expected of you. So you can't just say, well, I'm doing the same as the other guy. No, each person has their own different obligations and responsibilities and needs. So you got to really focus on what it is that you're going to be able to do. You got to really focus on what it is that you have to do in order to accomplish your mission. So the question we're going to focus on today is how to break free from global issues, which is exile in general, Golus, and how we break free from our personal trouble as well. Whatever that personal problem is, every person you meet is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. So be kind. Be kind to every single person. They're struggling. Everybody's struggling. So let's take a look at what we can glean from this week's Torah portion. Remember, the Torah is not just happens to be the portion of the week, but the Alter Rebbe would teach us, the founder of Chabad would teach us, as medarf leben mit der Zeit, that we have to live with the times. What that means is that we have to find the answers to our current struggles today. Today's challenges have to be extracted from this week's Torah portion. It's within this week's Torah portion, by divine providence, that we're reading this portion, because this portion holds the answers to your personal struggles each and every single day of the year. So let's take a look at what happens. In this portion, we are introduced to the beginning of the Jewish people's entrance into their state of exile. You know, we began the book of Genesis with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Life was good for a very short while. It was 1 hour. Life was good until they messed up, right? And they didn't mess up. They deliberately did it. You watch the video. We're going to post it on YouTube, the video of the untold story of Adam and Eve. But we descended into a world of chaos and anarchy. You know, brothers killing each other, favoritism, but parents picking children over the others. You know, Isaac was almost killed by Ishmael, and Yitzchak was almost killed. No, Jacob was almost killed by Esau, and Joseph was almost killed by his brothers, and then he had a chance to take revenge on them. I mean, this is totally dysfunctional, right? And then at the very end, they descend to Egypt, and life is good for a little bit. They're in Egypt. Joseph is the prime minister of the land. Life is good. You know, they're living in the land of Goshen. It's like the Palm Beach of Egypt, right? It's good. There's golf courses there, I'm sure. And it says land of pastures. What do you think land of pasture means? It's golf courses, you know, that, you know. So there they are in Egypt, and life is good. Joseph is the ruler, but then Joseph prepares to die. And as Joseph prepares to die, you'll notice that what happens is that the Jewish people pretty much right away begin the descent into slavery. The descent into slavery pretty much begins right after Joseph passes away. And in fact, when he passes away, he gives them a code as to what it is that's going to free them from their Egyptian slavery. Remember, Egyptian slavery is the Passover story. It's the exodus from this Egyptian slavery, the bondage, that it really began with Abraham. Abraham was the first Jew, and God kind of gives him the memo. He puts him to sleep. He gives him this, the covenant of the parts in Parshas Lech Lecha, where God notifies him. He says, listen, it's going to be rough out there. Your kids are going to suffer for 400 years. It's going to be brutal. But at the end, it's going to be good. I mean, that's pretty intense, right? So that's what happens, right? God tells us to Abraham already. And now the Jewish people are descending into the fulfillment of their prophecy. They're going into Egypt. I mean, they already are in Egypt, but when Joseph dies is when slavery kind of begins. So let's watch the process. I want you to look in the Chumash at the very, very end of this week's Parsha, page 315. We're in the blue Chumash if you have a copy of this one. At the very end of today's Torah portion, Parshas Vayechi, the prophet, the Torah tells like this. Here. I'm going to read it in the Hebrew, guys, because the English is way too long for me. Here, so I'm on page 314. Just look at the third last verse. Verse 24, okay? And it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines on the bottom of the Hebrew. And Joseph says to his brothers, Anochi meit, I'm dying. And God will remember you. Double expression of remember. God will remember you. And he will elevate you from this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is interesting, by the way, right? Before the birth of Muhammad, before the birth of Islam, we're talking 3,600 years ago. 3,600 years ago, God already promised the land to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? I mean, this is just important to understand. The land of Israel belongs to Israel, right? That you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that.
500.
Right. Vayash by Yosef at Bnei Yisrael Emor, and Joseph made swear the Jewish people, saying, again, he repeats the word, Pakod yifkod elikim etchem, remember will remember, God you. So God will remember you, double expression. And I ask you to swear that you will elevate my bones from here. Where was Joseph ultimately buried, guys?
Oh, in Shechem.
Temporarily buried in the Nile, but they buried him in Shechem, which has been bastardized to be called Nablus, which is a Roman name. The Romans changed the name to Naples, right? Which they try to make it like an Italian city, but really it's Naples. They call it Nablus because the Palestinians can't say the letter P. So they say B, Nablus. I don't know. That's why there's no Palestinians, because the B is, they don't say P. They can't even say the letter P. They say Palestine. But Palestine, they can't say the P. It's not in their alphabet. Anyways, Vayamat Yosef, and Joseph dies. Ben Meyav Esther Shanim. But you know how he got to Shechem? How did he get there, to Israel? They schlepped his bones for 40 years through the desert. That's what they did. They brought him out of the Nile. Moses does this a little later before he comes out of Egypt. And they schlepped the bones of Joseph with all the brothers all the way to the promised land. Vayamat Yosef ben Meyav Esther Shanim. Joseph dies at 110 years old. And they embalmed him. And he was placed in the ark in Egypt. Chazak, v'nit chazek. Strength, and shall we continue to be strengthened, right? This is the end of the portion. So what's up? What's going on over here? Joseph gives them a code. Pakod yifkod, remember, shall remember. Double expression of remembrance. He says this is the code. First of all, it's a promise of redemption. But also, it's a sign of redemption. That Joseph is telling them, when a man will come to you and use this code word, this password, that's when you'll know that he's the guy that's coming to redeem you. And in fact, who was the guy that said these words? It was Moses. Right? Moses says, God has remembered you. The time has come. So you notice something very interesting over here. That Joseph is responsible for the key to break free from Egypt. He's given them the password. The guy you're supposed to believe is the guy that uses these words, Pakod Yifkod. And a special welcome to all of our friends here. Wow, so lots of friends going on over here. This is terrific. Lots of conversation. We're on Instagram today. We're on Twitter. We're on X. We're on LinkedIn. We're all over the place. Jack, you with us here? This is fantastic. Lots of new friends first. Brand new friends and old friends. Beautiful, everybody. Good to see you all. We'll keep it going. Okay. So Joseph is responsible for the exit from Egypt, for the key to break free from Egypt, the code. But Joseph is also the one who was responsible for the descent into Egypt in the very first place. How did the Jews get there? Think about it, right? Joseph was the one who was sold into slavery, but then what does he do? He finally reveals himself to his brothers. I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? Go fetch dad. Bring him down. As a famine in the land, we got to all live peacefully in Egypt. So Joseph is the one that brings him into Egypt. And Joseph is the one that takes them out of Egypt. So what's up with Joseph? If we could crack the code of Joseph, we might be able to crack the code of our own struggles too. Remember, the Torah portion is not just a history book. It's a life lesson. It's a life guide for us to be able to figure out how to live our lives. This is our GPS. This is our global positioning system to show us the direction, to give us a light in stormy waters, to be able to give us a map, a trajectory to break free. So if we can crack the code of Joseph, we'd understand how we got into Egypt in the first place and how we got out of Egypt at the very end. Remember what Egypt means. The word Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim. What does Mitzrayim mean? It means limitations. It means constraints. Mitzrayim means like narrow straits. That's the word Mitzrayim means. You know, you're like schlepping your way through. That's a Mitzrayim. It means like a verkvetched situation where you feel verkvetched. You can't manifest. You can't be free. You can't let your hair down. You're just sort of like limited. You struggle. You're tied up. You're restrained. You're restricted, right? So what is it about Joseph? Joseph is amazing, by the way. You know, Joseph is higher than all the other brothers, spiritually speaking. It's clear that Joseph was more spiritually elevated than his brothers. I mean, think about it. From his very first introduction to Joseph, at the beginning of the portion of Vayeshev, we're introduced to Joseph, who's telling his brothers about his dreams. What are his dreams? He's dreaming that his mother and his father and his brothers are all gonna bow down to him. And was that dream true? Yeah, the dream came true when eventually they all moved down to Egypt. And what did they do? They all bowed down to him. Amazing. So we see that this is not only because Joseph was spiritually a king. Remember, physically a king. Whatever happens in the physical world is a reflection of what goes on in the spiritual worlds, right? If you want to know if God loves you, this is what the Mishnah and Ethics of the Father says. You want to know if God loves you? Look around if people love you. Who is the person who is beloved by God? A person who is beloved by his fellow human beings. A person who is despised by his fellow human beings is despised by God too. That's what it says in the Ethics of the Fathers. So this world is a mirror image of what goes up in heaven. So if Joseph is elevated above his brethren in this world, if Joseph is elevated by his over his brethren in this world, it means he's elevated over his brethren, over his siblings and his father and his mother, even in heaven as well. What was the greatness of Joseph? What was different about Joseph? Manishtana, Joseph to his brothers. You know how he was different? Joseph was different to his brothers because what was their occupation? What was their vocation? They were shepherds. They would hang out in the meadows, meditating all day long. And Joseph would hang out not in the meadows, but in the metropolis. Joseph was on Main Street. He was up in the penthouse suite of Fifth Avenue, running business, running economical policy for the whole country, for the whole land. Joseph was an entrepreneur. They were spiritual shepherds. They could not deal with confrontation. They couldn't deal with challenges to their spirituality. They couldn't deal with it. To them, they needed to live a life that was sequestered, isolated, removed from the troubles of life. Joseph had the strength to take his faith, allow it to be challenged in the most insane, unthinkable ways. I mean, think about the seductress that he lived with, in whose house he lived for 2 years. Think about the imprisonment that he was abused with. Think about the scorn that he faced. Think about the scorn of his own brothers. Joseph really, really, really struggled. He really, really struggled. But he always maintained his faith. He kept an even keel. He never lost his cool. Think about it. Joseph is the most emotional person in the Torah. Cries more than anybody else in the whole Bible. I mean, he does have the longest narrative in the Torah, admittedly. Half the book of Genesis. But he cries, 8 or 9 times in the Torah. But he never loses his temper. He never says, why me? I mean, even Moses did that. Even Moses turns to God and he says, God Almighty, why? Moses does that. Joseph doesn't do that. Whatever happens to him, he's like cheerful. I'm happy. This is good. Everything is good. Just like Christopher's pointing out here, everything is good that God did is good. Yep, that's it. That's Joseph, right? So Joseph,
It's all good. Why is he crying?
crying from emotion, catharsis. He cried when he saw his father. He cried when he saw his brother. Yeah, I mean, he couldn't contain himself anymore. It was a cathartic explosion of emotion. That's what it was, right? So here we go. And what happens? Christopher says everything is good. It's just not yet. It's not yet good. A guy walked into my office yesterday, and he says, a couple, and they say, Rabbi, we want you to know, just before we begin the conversation, we are not shul goers. So I added, yet. Yet. Change the whole conversation. All right. So Christopher, you and I were on the same page here. All right, good. So what's going on over here? So Joseph is different than his brothers. Why? Because his brothers could not handle a challenge, spiritual challenge, and he mastered the spiritual challenge. They were drowning in the waves. He was surfing the waves. Right? If they would face challenge, they'd be knocked out. When he was facing challenge, he was knocked down. Knocked down, but not knocked out. Think about that. So Joseph was spiritually powerful to be able to overcome the challenge. He was not intimidated by the struggle. He was not intimidated by the struggle. Think about how you view competition. Think about that just for a moment. How you view competition. Some people get intimidated by competition. Other people, do you know anybody that gets enthralled by competition? Yeah? Empowered? Yeah? I mean, think about it. That's two ways of looking at life. It's just two ways. Some people are just like totally intimidated. I mean, like the Russians, everything's going to be one, communist system, right? But then in America, I think the Russian mentality versus the communist versus the capitalist mentality, right? Communist mentality is like, it's got to be one post office, one bread line, one grocery. That's it, right? In capitalist society, forget about it. That's like, no, competition is good for everybody. It's what keeps the world going. This is the Joseph mindset. It's the Joseph way of looking at things. Think about the airplane. Think about the airplane, which thrives when it's facing the opposing winds. In fact, if not for the opposing winds, the airplane would always remain grounded on the floor. It's the opposing winds which allow the airplane to lift off, right? This is very interesting. Think about how you look at competition. Do you get intimidated or do you get empowered? This is the difference between Joseph and his brothers. His brothers were intimidated, and that's why they just kept a far distance. They wouldn't touch competition with a 10-foot pole. Joseph, on the other hand, dives right in, feet first. He's like, yep, I can do this. No problem. In fact, you know what happens when the brothers meet Joseph? It's amazing. The Torah tells us they meet Joseph. He's the prime minister of Egypt. Oh, Marty, beautiful. Vayaker Yosef et Echav, and Joseph recognizes his brothers, but they didn't recognize him. Beyond just a mere narrative that, he was wearing an Egyptian Tutankhamun kind of mask thing, maybe, maybe looked like a mummy, who knows? Maybe they were one of those weird, long Egyptian beards. What was that even? I mean, seriously, what is that thing? Is that a style?
Wait, excuse me.
No, but they had this like long, whatever. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's move on.
What about mine? They were nearly combatants.
He has a nice beard. Yeah. So Joseph. Joseph is probably dressed like an Egyptian. Fair enough, right? Maybe they didn't recognize him. Another reason on a very shallow level of interpretation is that the brothers had beards when they sold him as a slave. And he was a little kid. He was only 17. He didn't have a beard. So it could be, Rashi says that he didn't have a beard, and that's why I didn't recognize him. I mean, seriously, a beard? That's enough of a reason. There's got to be something deeper here. So the Chassidus teaches us that the reason I didn't recognize him is because it didn't even cross their minds that a Jew can occupy that seat of power. It didn't even occur to them. It's like, it's not possible that our brother will be the prime minister of Egypt, the president of the United States of America, or the vice president of the United States of America. It's not impossible. Didn't even cross their minds. This is actually part of the struggle why they hated him so much. Think about it. Why did the brothers hate Joseph so much? Because he was talking to them about people that bowing down to him. He was talking about the world dominion, global influence. I mean, this is like, and they were like, what is wrong with you, man? We don't deal with that stuff. Let's get rid of this kid. He's a danger to the family legacy. You know, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we work very hard to protect their legacy, to keep the, the business going, But if you're going to go out into like talk about power and influence, forget about it. You're a threat. Just get rid of this kid. Let's kill him. But then the moment at the 11th hour, just before they killed him, it says, there's like this verse in the Torah, which is not clear who spoke it. It's not clear. Like they decided to sell him as a slave instead of killing him. And we shall see what shall be of his dreams. It's not clear who said those words. And we shall see what shall be of his dreams. Was it the brothers who said that? Or was it like a third party narrator, God, who said that? It seems like it was a third party narrator, God. Like the purpose was to see, just in case, maybe, Joseph was right. That the continuity of dad's legacy of Judaism is through Main Street and not through the meadows. Let's give him a chance and see what happens. But they didn't think that guy is their brother because it didn't even dawn upon them. And that's why, by the way, it says, when the Torah introduces us to Joseph, it says, it says, Ele toldot Yaakov, Yosef. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph was 17 years old. So if you read the sequence of those words, when we first introduced to Joseph, these are the generations of Jacob, Joseph. Why is the next word Joseph? Because who was the culmination of Jacob's power? Who took Jacob to the next level? It's Joseph. Joseph's unique path. It's very unique, very different to the brothers. Was the one that really manifests the legacy and the dreams and aspirations of Jacob. Jacob was in the incubator, like a business, like a startup in Israel. You'll invest in a startup in Israel, and it's starting up in a little incubator, right? But then at one point, it's time for an IPO. So when it's time for an IPO, so just do the IPO. Don't just keep it stuck in the incubator. Take it out of the incubator and put it in Wall Street. Get it out there. So Joseph is the Wall Street to Jacob's incubator. And now we understand who Joseph was. Now we can begin to understand and appreciate how Joseph was different to his brothers. And now we can start to connect the dots as to how Joseph was the one who brought them into Egypt and Joseph was the one who took them out of Egypt. If we can connect to the power of Joseph, we could be able to break free. We'll be able to enter into a compromised situation in the darkest world without fear. And we'd be able to exit it unscathed. See, it's a lot to think about. You're going to meditate about this concept, guys. This is a big deal. This is a really big deal. I mean, Judaism is so much more than just idiosyncratic rituals. It's
and telling stories.
Yeah, exactly. It's so much more than telling stories. Judaism is I was sitting with somebody the other day. This guy comes to our golf event, but I'm in a relationship with him. So I went over and I'm like, listen, sir, I appreciate you investing in our golf event, investing in our Chabad, but I'd like a relationship with you. We appreciate your money, but I want the mensch. I want to get to know the mensch. So I'm at his office, and the guy doesn't believe in anything. Nothing. He doesn't believe in God. He doesn't have a bris. He doesn't have a bris, right? And he doesn't.
That's the thing to do.
I said I have a knife.
That's it. I can help you.
He wasn't interested. So what happened was that I'm talking to him, and he says to me, I actually gave him a book called 101 Meditations from the Rebbe. It's a book by Tzvi Freeman, I think it is. No, I think it's Tzvi Freeman. Whatever, nice book. Thin book, 101 Meditations from the Rebbe. And I gave him as a gift. He's looking at it, and he sees like these, very personal meditations about life. He says, to me, this is not Judaism. I'm like, what is this? No, he says, this is life. So I'm like, oh, I see what you're saying. Judaism is like boring ritual, like reading in a foreign tongue for endless hours on end, right? That's Judaism, right? Yishai Fleischer is here with us. This is amazing. Yishai, welcome to Chabad of Palm Beach Gardens. Yishai is a major influence. This guy's got like hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube. He's amazing. Yishai, great to have you with us. Give me some tips, man. All right. So remember that we're in the marketplace of ideas, right? Guys, it's awesome. Yishai Chazak, my friends. He's in Israel. This guy's awesome. So where was I going with this? So he was saying, yeah, Yishai, share the video. All right. So where was I going with this, guys? Where was I going? I was saying that this guy was telling me that Judaism is an idiosyncratic ritual. It's mindless reading of foreign tongues for endless hours, only for certain kinds of people that have life. But if you're going to give me this book, which is interesting, that can't be Judaism. That was like such an interesting conversation. Thank God, on the way out, I'm trying to connect with this guy. And eventually I said to him, do you at least get my emails? He said, oh, I love your emails. I'm like, oh, so we have a connection. So at least he reads my emails. We got a connection. Fine. Maybe he thinks it's not Jewish. It's fine. Okay, good. It's personal. It's actually relevant. And therefore it's not Judaism. Okay. So, so this is how Joseph understands life. Joseph doesn't see life in conflict with his faith. He sees the confluence of life and faith as one. Life, faith, one and the same. It's awesome. This is Joseph. Joseph sees harmony, unity in everything that he does. He doesn't see a conflict in his bank account and his experience on the Bima. He doesn't see a conflict between his harmony in his marriage, his parenting with his children, and his relationship with his Father in heaven. It's all one and the same. It's a 360-degree Unitarian, is that the right word? No. United approach, a monotheistic approach to life, where everything is from Hashem and everything is for Hashem, and Hashem is everywhere. Hashem is within everything. There's faith, there's beauty, there's light within everything I know. And this is the approach of Joseph. So Joseph, what happens when he sees a competitor? What happens when Joseph sees a problem, when he sees a struggle, when he sees a challenge? Joseph says, look, I know who you are. I know you're just an apparition. Everything is from Hashem. I'm not intimidated. I'm not intimidated by the competition. I'm not intimidated by the struggle. I know this is nothing more than just a test. The brothers recoil. The brothers of Joseph, they can't handle competition. They see Joseph. They can't even tell who he is. This is not somebody we recognize as our brother. And it's this that the Torah is trying to teach us, according to our Rebbe. The Rebbe teaches us this message. The Rebbe is teaching us, you want to break free, you've got to be able to adopt X-ray vision. You want to break free, you've got to be able to see through the soul of everything that stands in your way. You've got to be able to recognize and realize that nothing is real. It's all a test from God. Think about some of the greatest people in Jewish history that did this. What happens if the Jewish people came to the Red Sea? Moses is like, that way. And they're like, are we missing something? Or like, hello, there's a sea in front of us. So all the people were like frozen like a deer in the headlights. One guy, Nachshon ben Aminadab, says, if Moses said that way, then we go that way. And the guy just marches in, gets all wet, right? And when he reaches the point of self-sacrifice, or the water covers his nose, bam, the waters of the sea split. Abraham does the same story, by the way, exactly the same story. When Abraham was on a mission to go bind his son upon the altar, the story of Isaac, the binding of Isaac, it doesn't say, by the way, the sacrificing of Isaac. God never told him, read the verse, God never told him, I checked it up, to actually bind the son upon the altar. It says, V'haleu leolah, and raise him up upon the altar. It doesn't say actually cut him. So he was on the way there, and the Satan puts a river in his way, a raging river. It must be like a Florida hurricane style river, like, one of those. And any normal person would have said, oh well, guess it wasn't meant to be. If God wanted me to go, he would have made the storm. Abraham's like, I get this. This is just a test. I'm not afraid. I am marching forward. And that's why Abraham is the first Jew. The question is if you have the guts to do that. I think that modern science helps us to apply this concept. Think about this. It's amazing. What modern science has done for us? Watson and Crick. Great guys. Watson and Crick. They discovered the DNA. Which that means, even before them, who discovered the atom? I can't think of him right now. Anybody know? Whoever discovered the atom. It's a great book. So what happened was that, if you think about it, I'm made up of atoms. You're made up of atoms. The table's made up of atoms. The intercontinental ballistic missile is made up of atoms, right? The Wall Street Stock Exchange is made up of atoms. Everything's made up of atoms. And what's an atom? An atom is an inexplicable burst of energy. It's a bunch of electrons running around a proton, right? That's what it is, right? Neutron particles just flying around each other, faster than the speed of light, if I'm not mistaken. These guys are just like going somewhere in a hurry, and nobody knows why. Science cannot actually explain till this very day why electrons move. It's amazing. They can't explain why electrons move, but we just know that that's what makes life. But they can't, it's like the finger of God. You can't explain why that happens, right? But if you think about it, every single thing in the world, from a thought to a brick wall, is made up of atoms. Everything. Right? That's why thinking makes you tired. It's energy. It's energy. Think about it. It's energy. And if that's the case, every single thing in this universe is made up of energy, then what are you intimidated from? Everything's energy. It's the same as me. That's the holistic view of reality. And this is Joseph. And when Joseph takes this approach, he's able to bring his people, says, come with me to Egypt. Come live with me in Egypt. Adopt my mindset. Rise above the challenge. Learn to surf the waves instead of drowning in the waves. And with that mindset, Joseph is one that's able to carry them all the way through to the exodus from Egypt. To be able to say, guys, you're going to do this. I know it's not going to be easy. You might get knocked down, but you'll never get knocked out with this mindset, with the Joseph mindset. And that's why I believe Joseph is the longest narrative in the Torah, because it's so critically important for us to adopt his mindset. And guys, we can do this. Think about it for a second. We're American Jews. We are American Jews. We're not the Jews of the shtetl. Think about that. For like about 1,000 years, I don't know how long they lived in the shtetl. They lived lives that were sequestered. Again, it wasn't by their own choice. They were forced there. They were ghettos. There were segregated communities where Jews had to live. Jews weren't allowed to live in certain parts of the city. Remember, the Pale of Settlement is a place that only Jews were allowed to live in, like Russia, Asia area. Today, we live in a free world. It's amazing. I think it was Jonathan Sacks. I know it was Jonathan Sacks who said something amazing. He said, we're supposed to be a light unto the nations. Think about this. Brilliant. It takes a Jonathan Sacks to come up with this. He says, we're a light unto the nations, right? But think about it. For like 2,000 years, let's say 1,800 years, we weren't unto the nations. We were a light. We had our light in the shtetl, but we weren't unto the nations. We were not influencing anybody. In fact, if you did make the mistake of influencing anybody, you'd get killed because, God forbid, you were rebelling against the king or the Catholic Church or something, right? When the Jews lived amongst the Arabs, life was not as dangerous as when we lived amongst the Christians, but it was more humiliating. The Christians just killed us. The Muslims just denigrated us. You weren't allowed to ride a horse in the presence of a Muslim. You were allowed to have a building that was taller than the Muslim buildings. You were allowed to have certain occupations. They called them dhimmis, D-H-I-M-M-I, dhimmis. The Jews were like a lower status. So what happened was then that if you weren't allowed to influence a Muslim, that was like treasonous. Not influence anybody. Today we're allowed to influence, and that's what we're doing right now. We're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're all over the place. Thank God, right? We're spreading the message, spreading the light. But so we're unto the nations. Fantastic. The question is, are we now a light? Have we focused so much on the nations that we lost the light? That's what Jonathan Sacks says. So Jews have become so integrated that they become assimilated, and they forgot that they're Jews. The balance is to be able to maintain your light whilst you're influencing the nations, as opposed to just being so excited that you're accepted by the nations that you forget to shine your light. And that's our goal. We've got to be the Joseph of our times. We've got to be the Joseph of our times to be able to be proud, strong Jews. Proud of our heritage, proud of our faith, proud of our Jewish identity. And that's to be able to descend into wherever places that we go and to shine our light in those places. Because when we do that, that's how we're going to have the courage to break free. By not being intimidated from our troubles.
That's the Soviet Jewry.
Soviet Jewry movement.
Look at Pam Cohen.
What did she do? Tell me.
She was instrumental in freeing 1 million.
So Pamela Braun Cohen, in her book Hidden Heroes, she fearlessly confronted the Soviets. Yeah. This woman, she was not religious even. And when she realized that she was fighting for Jews who actually believed in their own faith, she kind of discovered her own faith. It was an amazing experience, and she spoke about it right here in Eshel, thanks to Harvey. So that's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. It's breaking free. That's right. Beautiful. I love that. So she was able to break free from the Soviet movement, from the Soviet prison, by having the courage of not being intimidated. And I believe that this is a very powerful message for us to apply in our general exile, as well as in our specific exile that we're in your personal troubles right now. Don't be afraid. Guys, remember, the most oft repeated directive in all of Torah is Al Tira. Don't be afraid. Don't fear. Don't fear. Fear is your enemy. We have nothing to fear, said a great man, but fear itself. Right? Franklin, right? It was Benjamin Franklin, right?
No, it wasn't.
Roosevelt, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Franklin Roosevelt. Right. FDR.
I agree.
We have nothing to fear but fear itself. Nothing to fear but fear itself. Which means that fear is actually validating the problem that you face. Fearlessness invalidates the problem you face and empowers you with the power of God Almighty. Right? So when you do that, when you adopt that approach, when you remember the words of Joseph, then you can say, remember, he shall remember. God will remember us, but not just God will remember us. Perhaps the meaning of these words at the very end of the Chumash of Bereshis today is that it's us that needs to remember. Remember, you shall remember. Remember me, says Joseph. If you can not just remember me, but doubly remember me, If you can remember my legacy, my lifestyle, my worldview, my Weltanschauung, if you can do that, remember and surely remember through the darkest of times and through the greatest and harshest of challenges, that's when you're going to be free. That's when you'll be able to set yourself free from your troubles. And God willing, we all shall be able to experience a redemption like Joseph and the Jewish people from the land of Egypt. We too should be able to experience redemption from this bitter exile. Almost 2,000 years of struggle to be able to set ourselves free, to bring the world, all of humanity, Jews and Gentiles, Christians, Muslims, and other people, other nations, all will be able to live beautifully at peace with personal self-esteem. Nobody will have to look at somebody else in order to feel good about themselves. Nobody will need to destroy someone else in order to pick themselves up. But everybody will be able to be validated and find purpose in their own existence in a life which is harmonious, a life which is purposeful. We then all will be free. Thank you very much, everybody.
Rabbi